Okay, we are on the part 2 of the energy storage. In this part, we are going to talk about the batteries. The battery storage, it is mainly used to do the load leveling. In fact, when you are connecting to the, for example, the wind power or the solar power, they are mostly intermittent. As a result, you cannot simply hook it up to the grid and expect it to take the load whenever you are generating the power. So one application for the large scale power systems is the storage is used for load leveling. And in fact, there are large scale battery storage systems now being commercially made to serve this purpose. So the way it works is you take the large number of batteries and charge it during the low demand periods. For example, 1 acre could store 400 megawatt hours of energy, delivering 40 megawatts for 10 hours, and that's pretty good storage. And in fact, such large storages do exist today for a different reason. So the Southern California Edison, for example, uses a large number of lead acid battery modules to deliver 10 megawatts of power for 4 hours of continuous discharge. And this is used because this is mainly used in Los Angeles, because when earthquake times most of the power system goes down and they need emergency services, and for that they use this sort of a service. And these kind of installations are around the country for emergency purposes, and people commonly don't pay attention to this. But these are, you can see there are large number of lead acid batteries, and these are, of course, lead acid batteries are not the most desirable ones, but they are the cheaper ones to use, or the actually cheapest ones to use today. The history of the batteries a little bit. This is a very old technology. First battery, for example, the principle is invented as far back as 1800, and those days they started out with what is called the flow battery. So they are essentially two liquids which are chemically different, and we'll come back to that. And now we are coming back to this old idea, the way it started out, trying to build the flow batteries. So you can look at the improvements over the time, which you can see that even in 1930s, for example, we have built electric cars. So as far back as 1930s, we are running on electric cars. The gasoline was only invented in 1916. Then of course, it became very cheap. Then we converted from electric cars to the gasoline. Now we are going back to electric cars for a different reason. So there are typical batteries discovered during over the period of time, and then the most popular one right now is the lithium-ion battery, and this has a technology that was initially put into practice by Japanese in 1991, which is relatively new. And then by 1997, of course, we have the hybrid car, which is a Prius, and that of course uses nickel metal hydride batteries, which are invented in '86. So the reliability of those were already proven. As a result, they use that. I think now, I'm not very sure, but I think the batteries which are used even in the Prius are the lithium ion. The most popular one, some of you may have seen the Tesla electric car, and that uses the lithium ion batteries. In fact, the cost of the lithium ion batteries are coming down in price. In about 6 months to a year's time, it's going to drop quite a bit because there is a large plant being built in Nevada by the Tesla and the Panasonic together, and that is going to manufacture large number of batteries, mainly intended for two purposes: one, to use in the cars, and the second is for the energy storage systems using the solar or the wind. The recent advances in the batteries in terms of mostly energy density, I think the technology point of view, there are some changes, and the most of the new developments has taken place since 2009. And in fact, US government has spent close to $5 to $6 billion to develop the new technology. And as a result of this, which is we have to thank President Obama for this. And because of this infusion of the large funds, there are now better technologies in lithium ion, lithium polymer, lithium air batteries, and along the way came increasing the energy density, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So the technology, the impetus for the tremendous growth in the recent past is due to the funding created by the Obama administration. And typical characteristics in the batteries are the energy density, which we talk about that. You want this thing to be as high as possible. This is essentially kilowatt hours per kilogram of the weight of the battery, and how fast we can charge it, and how we can customize this. Customization, because in terms of the voltage and the current they can store and deliver, this is depending upon the application. We should be able to adapt the battery technology to different applications. And another thing is environmental point of view, the materials which you use should be non-toxic and non-volatile. And also we like to use the materials abundant on the earth, because lithium is not a material which is abundant, but there is enough, I guess, to go for the time being. But eventually we don't want to use the lithium as a way of making batteries. And the last one is the affordability. So the question is how much they cost. So the cost performance is a very important factor in looking at the battery characteristics. And the performance factors for the battery is the lifetime. So that means the maximum number of charge and discharge cycles, and the overall cycle efficiency, that is efficiency in multiplied by efficiency out. So when you're charging it, how efficiently you are charging it, and when you're taking out, how efficiently you are taking out. And there are also what is called the depth of discharge cycle. This is called the deep cycle. That means less instant energy but longer term energy delivery. So these are deep cycle batteries or lead acid batteries. Typically they are used for the golf cart and other applications like that. And the cost of unit of power or energy stored is another parameter which we have to consider. So these are the characteristics of those what we mentioned in some of the batteries commonly used right now. So lead acid, in terms of the watt hours per kilogram, it's about 35. Nickel cadmium, nickel hydrogen, and the look at lithium, and that is the reason they are most popular. They have the highest energy density compared to any of these other battery technologies. Then there's watt hours per meter cube, that is a volumetric density. So essentially what you want to do is how many watt hours can you store in a given space. This becomes a very important thing when you are talking about automobiles, because you don't want to occupy entire car with batteries. That isn't the whole purpose. So you have to make sure that this is as high as possible. And then the voltage they will deliver in each cell, because the batteries are made of several cells. And right now lithium is about 3.6, but the newer technologies go almost up to 5. And life cycle is very important, and lithium has about 2,000 cycles left, but I think it's a little bit more than that with the newer technology. So these are the typical characteristics of the batteries we use currently. And these are the more of these characteristics. In this particular case, this is called the gravimetric energy density, that is watt hours per kilogram. So you can see that lithium ion is pretty good, and the lithium ion cobalt is the newer one, and that is also in fact pretty high. And the internal resistance in milliohms and for these things, and cycle life, and first charge time, and how long it takes for you to charge the battery, and overcharge tolerance, And so these are some of the characteristics you need to use to determine how well it can be done. And safety is very important. So one of the important things you have to look at is thermally stable or not. As most of you know, one of these lithium-ion batteries used in Boeing 787 caused some problems initially because they are heating up, and then the casing they were put in could not withstand the heat, and then fire started, and so now they have solved that problem. So you have to make sure when the batteries are being used, they of course generate a lot of heat, and you want to make sure that that is within the limits of the fire hazard where they are being used. So this is a plot which we call it watt hours per kilogram, same as what we have seen before, and watt hours per meter cube. So this is a volumetric density and gravimetric density here. This is watt hours per kilogram in this particular case, and this is of course when you are higher this number, the lighter the thing is going to be. This is watt hours per liter or the meter cube. So the smaller, if you keep going this way, then the battery, this system, the smaller in size. So the lead acid, for example, is somewhere here, and where we want to be is in this corner right here. So the Department of Energy in the United States has the goal of having 400 watt hours per kilogram. When once you have that, you can have cars which can go almost about 300 to 400 miles or 500 kilometers or so. So the goal of the battery technology is to come to here, and I think we are almost there. We pretty much got to 300, I think, and I'll show you some examples of how we can get there. Energy density, which is watt hours per meter cube in here, and specific energy watt hours per kilogram, and lithium ion is sitting right here, and future lithium sulfur is where it is, but I think lithium ion is going something like this right now because of the nanotechnology improvements made in the batteries. So eventually you want to be somewhere here. So I think the technology is coming toward in this direction, and we will essentially realize the goal of the Department of Energy. And in the car batteries, the smaller, lighter, better batteries, so the people are using lithium polymer right now, lithium ion, for example. So we want to be in this corner, they want to be very light, and you want to be very small. So the idea here is to get to this corner, and you can see the slope, how the progression is. We are getting in that direction. And this is a example of, for example, you take the lithium ion battery, which has, let's say, 500 kilograms in weight, and the battery weight is this is the you have 200, this is 100 watt hours per kilogram specific density, and that weighs roughly about 500 kilograms, and this is the range you are going to get. And if you have, for example, 200 watts per kilogram, you can see the increase in range, and then eventually when you get to 400 watts per kilogram, you can see that we achieve the range which we are supposed to get to about this is what. So the progression here is as you increase the specific density, and you can see you are increasing this, and that's what you want to do. So the goal, which is the 400 watts per kilogram, is what the Department of Energy goal is to get the required, which is about 500 kilometers. So that is what we are shooting for. And where are we right now in terms of the technology? This is a bit outdated. This is 2011. Things have changed a bit since then, and I think that watt hours per kilogram we are pretty close to lithium ion. So we are almost. This is of course theoretical. We are sitting somewhere. I think we are somewhere here compared to 2011. And there is another technology which is lithium sulfur. People are working on it very diligently. Now this is, for example, one of the latest technologies. This is the lithium sulfur battery, and this is how thin they are. These are like cells. People are and then you put a whole bunch of these cells, connect them in series or parallel depending what your application is. And this is a company, in fact you can see it here. You can go to this website and learn more about this battery. And then there is this megawatt-class large size battery storage, and this is, for example, Mitsubishi makes this. This is like a storage box in here. This is 40-foot long container, which is shipping container essentially. It has 2,000 units of lithium-ion rechargeable batteries, and it can store up to 408 kilowatt hours of energy, of power, and it has an efficiency of about 25%. But if you look at in our current parameters in the previous plot, this is only about 132 watt hours per kilogram, and it has a 284. And so if you improve this guy much bigger, which is what is we are getting to, and then this is this unit can deliver almost twice than this. So a unit like this can give almost 1 megawatt hour of storage. So that is pretty, one ship container. So that's a pretty good storage system. So the way that this is simply to explaining lithium-ion battery operation. This you can learn that from material science programs. So essentially you have the positive electrode and negative electrode here, and what people are trying to do is the entire technology is within the electrode design and how they perform. So everybody is working on to make these electrodes as efficiently as possible so that you can increase the energy density of the battery. So this is the cathode is typically made out of lithium cobalt oxide. So these are the materials which are being used, and so people are trying to use different kinds of the materials to improve the performance. So the goal essentially here is to get to more than 400 watt hours per kilogram. And in fact, if you use what this particular picture is shown, you can get to almost 500 watt hours per kilogram. So that's beyond what is talked about. This is another company which has already reached that stage in a production point of view, and this is a company in Silicon Valley, and this is called NVIDIA Systems, and these guys have generated a cell which provided 400 watt hours per kilogram and at a cost of $125 per kilowatt hour. So this is actually, these are a very high capacity manganese rich cathodes are being used, and these are silicon carbon nano composite anode. So essentially what prompted, what made this technology to work is using the nano fabrication technologies. And it also, one of the good things about this battery is it is stable up to a voltage of 5.2 volts. Typically lithium-ion batteries are around 3.2, 3.6, and this one is operating almost at 5.2 volts, and that makes it compact for a given power. And for example, these are the cells, these are quite small, and these are the 45 amp hour cells. So you put a whole bunch of them together to make a battery. So this technology is moving very rapidly, and this is in fact one of the companies that have benefited from the Department of Energy program on the funding for the battery technology. So you can see that we pretty much reached goal of 400 watts per kilogram, which we said in the previous slide. Now these are the newer technologies. This is it's called flow batteries. Actually, these are the originally when the battery started out, this is how we started. So the electrolyte is in the two big tanks, and these are mainly used for large scale systems. These are not for automobiles and things like that. These are trying to store megawatts of storage, and this has the best features of the fuel cell and the batteries. Fuel cell is of course opposite of the battery. So it has essentially two salt solution electrolytes which store and release the electricity through the electrochemical reactions. So these essentially the fluids, they have electrochemical reactions taking place when you charge it and when you discharge it. So this is a new technology. I mean, well, it's not new. The idea is old, but now we are coming back to this for large scale storage. And there is this again similar idea. It's called MIT liquid battery, and this is of course this is all research in the research phase. So you can look at this in the description of this technology in this magazine which came out in 2009, and there are better articles on this since then. And this is again all liquid battery. Again there are two different liquids in here. Molten magnesium in the top electrode, and the middle electrode, the green is the molten antimony. So when you charge it, it has this color. When you're discharging it, it is going through, and complete discharge is like this. So this is another technology people are using for large scale storage. But these are research, so essentially I'm just pointing out these things so that you know where the technology is heading. We are not stuck in the lead acid batteries for years to come. So we are moving away from that. And for example, this is how the battery storage is used in a car and how it affects the price and performance of the car. And we typically use in the United States about 1.5 kilowatt of electricity every hour. Typical storage requirement is about 15 kilowatt hours in a typical home, and if your battery capacity is 400 watt hours per kilogram, for this requirement it weighs about 38.5, and it's going to cost about $3,000. So now this is essentially not a bad solution. So you have solar panels on your roof, and most of the electricity being used during the evenings. But then the sun is not out, so essentially you store in the battery system this much energy, and this is what the cost is, and then you can essentially go out off the grid and run your house pretty much using the solar PV panels. And if you look at the typical compact automobile power requirement is about 50 kilowatts. Leaf, for example, Nissan Leaf, I think has not more than 50 kilowatts of battery storage on that. And typical driving distance is about 500 kilometers, and average speed, I mean this is city speed what we are looking at, and required energy storage is going to be 250 kilowatt hours to accomplish these distance and the speed. And then by average battery capacity is 400 watt hours per kilogram, assuming, and the battery weight is going to be 625. That's not too bad. Typical car weighs about 2,000 kilograms, so the battery weight comes to about 1/3 of the total car weight. And of course the cost is a little high at the moment, but I think that there is a GM which is releasing a car this year. It has a car which is being released. It has a range of about 200 kilometers, which is what this called Bolt. The car is called Bolt, GM. And it has a 200 kilometer range, and the cost is going to be about $35,000. So you can see that we are, well, this kind of a range, and the total car cost should not exceed, the entire car cost, not the battery cost, about $50,000 with this kind of range. And we may get there, or it may cost a little bit more than that. So right now, of course, Tesla, which is most of you know, and that is about 200-mile range. In the particular case, now it's cost about roughly $100,000. And you can see most of the cost, of course, batteries in that particular case may cost around this much to get to the range of 200 miles. So we are moving towards efficient, cost-effective automobiles within very soon. So you can see that photovoltaics become very usable when once we have the storage, so we can, a lot of people can cut off from the grid and simply use the put PV and batteries together and then have a off-grid house for usage. Okay, thank you.